And you mentioned how the Chicago teacher strike was sort of predicated on a change in leadership in the union, and really the UAW, same situation, in part like with an assist, I guess, from the DOJ.
That's what I was just going to say. That's exactly right. A big assist.
All right. Well, walk us through that so that everybody understands that.
Yeah, I mean, a huge assist, and that's not bad. As organizers, you got to be ready to capture a moment when it's presented to you. So, a bunch of members in the UAW did, but I'll just say, without that assist, without the corruption scandal, so there was a long investigation similar to the one that went on in the Teamsters in the 90s. Like a multi-year monitor was assigned. A corruption scandal. There were hints of a giant corruption scandal inside the National United Auto Workers. Monitors and trustees were sent in from the federal government to start doing an investigation. And lo and behold, what all of us knew, I mean, I'm a member of the UAW, right, in the academic division. So what all of us knew forever was the place was corrupt as any, I was going to say DeSantis, but, got to get the analogy right. That's not quite right. But the Supreme Court, I don't know, getting closer to corruption levels that are pretty high. But anyway, and so there was the corrupt staff were peeled out of the way. Neutral people got put into positions, and then smart people in the progressive forces, United Auto Workers for Democracy, a small caucus formed and thought that we're going to demand a referendum to direct elect the president of this union, which has never happened in the entire life of the United Auto Workers. It was always to like a convention, delegates, and then they pick who the leader is. Totally controlled, completely top down. Don't even try to run from those convention spots if you don't want to, find your tires slashed, whatever. I mean, really bad stuff. So it's a very low turnout election in the referendum, I think 2.5 years ago. My timeline everything is just nuts after the pandemic in my brain, timeline wise. I very excitedly waited for my ballot in the mail, voted yes to have direct election of the United Auto Workers president to remove the corruptible, still layer of bureaucracy that's not great in the union. And we win. I mean, that's all analysis, but actually the workers win a direct election. And I'm caught off guard by that. And again, it happened because it was a very low turnout. I mean, the administration caucus, who ran the union to the ground forever, called the administration caucus versus United Auto Workers for Democracy caucus. No, soundbite there. And then that set the stage for a team of opposition leaders to run for office for the first time at the presidency. And that becomes Sean Fain, the new president. And even that was a squeaker. Yeah. Yeah.
Let me, to the extent that there was still an establishment, because a lot of two different presidents, obviously former presidents, go to jail over this. And there was a lot of corruption. They were using, dues to basically just live an exorbitant lifestyle. There was some question, I think, too, of whether they were getting money directly from the people they were supposedly negotiating with.
Yeah.
But to the extent that there was any sort of establishment left that still had control of the system within the UAW, how is it they didn't turn out the vote, I guess, to sort of maintain that power structure? Do they just underestimate, what was going on out there?
Yeah, definitely. They'd had control for so long. I think that they were so arrogant they could not imagine that they would be beat. So I think it's like the same thing with, say, in a union fight. If you have an A-level boss campaign, a B-level boss campaign, a C-level boss fight, and there's tiers of it. And one of the things we say that gets a lot of workers in trouble if people skip steps in an organizing campaign is that if you do win, that's where they usually hire, if the boss is asleep at the switch, that's what we call it, the boss is asleep at the switch and the workers won. On the other hand, that's good, but that's why there's a lot of this, we can't get to first contracts for 480 days stuff going on, because they skipped steps. I wrote a book called No Shortcuts. They skipped steps. In this case, they were asleep at the switch. They were constrained by the monitors. They couldn't just go into the database and do whatever they wanted with ballots and stuff them and all that stuff. and it was crucially a low turnout. So our side turned out in higher numbers than theirs did. And there was a real effort, like a really good effort by a bunch of people who are now in the headquarters to drive out a yes vote on direct democracy, one member, one vote for the presidency. It was a very good campaign. It's close still. But I think the internal opposition, meaning in this case, opposition to democracy, the administration caucus, I think they mostly just missed it, and then it was too late. And then it got even harder in the race for the presidency because they were much more onto it, which is why it went into a recount and a recount and a recount and a recount and a recount until Fain squeaked out the victory. And what a good thing.
Before we get take the storyline from Fain onward, I just also want to ask about the UAW's inclusion. You mentioned that you're part of the academic part of the UAW, and there's something like, I think it's like 80,000 workers in higher education are members of the UAW, and that's a relatively, in terms of those numbers, a relatively recent phenomenon. It's like, how much did the inclusion of those people who tend to be, at least this is my understanding, more left wing, I guess, or more, in some ways, progressive left wing, however you want to, then, maybe your average, or just more engaged in the unionization process than the average UAW member might have been. How much did that, like the existence of those folks within the UAW, end up leading to the surprise that the administrative caucus, for instance, was caught off guard? And how much is that sort of, influencing also what's going on with the UAW through Shawn Fain's election and into the strike?
I think it'd be silly to say that there was not any influence on that. And I think that was particularly true for the first vote, for the demand for one member, one vote, for what we call direct democracy. I think that the growing academic division probably weighed more heavily in there, just because I think for most people, members in the UAW from any sector, but certainly longtime core of the industry, the auto sector, just probably couldn't even believe that was possible. So I think in that initial round, which then sets up everything else, maybe it's slightly true, but I don't think when it got to the point of being able to throw the bums out and elect new leadership, I don't think that was, I think every single worker, probably starting with the auto workers, honestly, was ready to pull the lever for someone else. And Fain comes out of the rank and file membership for decades. Right. He's super real. He's not from the academic division. Hardly any of the ones who won were. I think one for sure was. Okay, and there's a new division created for the West Coast, where just at the University of California, there's 48,000 members. So there's a whole new West Coast academic sort of division. Then you get the Harvards and whatever. It is interesting, but and it'll become problematic if in the agreement moving forward, I think, if there isn't really strong what's called bargaining to organize language in these settlements. There's too many details we don't know about yet to get too deep into it. Honestly, we can say some top lines, but there's a lot of unknowns. They just posted the Ford one, and it's 360 pages and meant only for lawyers to read. It's the most, I don't believe in doing that in contracts at all. But in fairness, they did really good work in 5 months from when Shawn won in March, was certified as president in March, 1 week before, or basically walking into the bargaining convention to set up the big three negotiations. I mean, the guy had just taken office like days before, after all the delays by the administration caucus to try and unseat him and catch him on something like wrong guy. It was all of you who used to get caught doing that stuff, But given the time frame they had, the fact that they're stuck with 400 practically long page contracts, I like to have them down to about 20, or even one, as my mentors taught me. It says, everything is the way we want it, and we will sign off on any changes. Like, I always say that's right. The ideal union contract. It's a page, not 380 pages of lawyer talk. But anyway, so Yeah, I think the academic stuff matters, but I think this period is about putting the core jurisdictions of the United Auto Workers, which is the auto workers, parts suppliers, supply shops, or all different divisions, but putting them back at the center of their own historic union. And well done on that account. So I don't think the academic vote had any difference in electing Fain. And yeah, I really don't. And the slate that came with Fain, I think everyday ordinary people in that union were sick and tired of concessions, and that was hitting the auto sector the most. Decades of concessions. I think every one of them perfectly understood what was going on and couldn't wait to have a real choice.